No, one of you ordered them.
Oh, yeah.
And we ordered a few more.
We needed them anyway.
Yeah, oh yeah.
There will be other opportunities afterwards too. I'll explain it. I mean, you're more than welcome to now if you want.
Yeah. Pila, Jamie, Kiernan.
Oh, I know Kern's out there. I saw him
Yeah.
on Facebook.
Yeah. Jamie he said that Summit County Health Department sent all their sewer inspection certified mail today. He texted me this week, he's always done the house by 10 o'clock. It was like 12:50. This dude, my son is, if I get done, I can come in and catch up with it. I'll try to, but
Yeah, he starts.
up here at least.
Yeah. Ready, Charlotte?
Yep.
I now call to order the Norton City Council Committee work session of Monday, May 1st, 2023. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silent reflection. And just a note as we rise, if you could keep in your thoughts and prayers the family of former council member Bill Helmick. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Lukens,
Mr. Lukens is excused.
Mr. Bates,
Here.
Mr. Kernan,
Mr. Kernan is excused.
Mr. Pelot,
Mr. Pelot is excused.
Ms. Whipke. Here. Mr. DeHarpart,
Here.
Mr. Townsley.
Here. Before we go into communications of the public, as I mentioned before we said the Pledge of Allegiance, unfortunately last week the city lost former council person Bill Helmick. He passed away. And I just want to send my condolences to the family and acknowledge his service to the city. And I also wanted to open the floor up to anybody else up here who wanted to speak on that.
I'll just say, Mr. Helmick was a neighbor, lived across the street from me, and if you knew Mr. Helmick, he always had a very well-groomed yard, and he and I often had competitions going back and forth of who had the nicest cut lawn, and many conversations that we had about things going on in the city led me to actually run for council here in Norton. So Mr. Helmick will be greatly missed.
So that's how we got you.
And if if I may, with Mr. Helmick, Mr. Helmick was on city council for a number of years, and as well as he served on boards and commissions for the city as well from time to time. I also served on a board of directors with Johnson United Methodist Church with him for a number of years, and came to become a good friend and a good friend of his. So he will be dearly missed.
I knew Bill Helmick for quite a while, too. I really thought a lot of the man. He was well-knowledged. He served his city and country well. He's been missed, actually. I've missed seeing him on the BZA floor from all the meetings I went through since a couple years back, I think is when he gave it up. But he was definitely a pistol, full of energy and full of ideas.
And I'll just add, if you look outside the city buildings today, that you will see all the flags are flown half-staff for Mr. Helmick today.
Anybody else? Okay, also before we move on to communications from the public, the mayor has a presentation he'd like to give, so I'll turn it over to you, Mayor Zita.
Thank you. I would just like to acknowledge GFOA, which is the Government of Financial Officers Association, presented us with a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. This actually goes to Pam Keener, our finance director here in the city. I know that we, as at the city, know she does a fantastic job. It's also good to see that outside organizations see this and recognize this also. So at this time, I would like just to present Ms. Keener with the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. Thank you very much.
And I'd like to add to that, that one of council's functions is the pocketbook of the city. And when your finance director is doing their job correctly, it makes it a little bit easier for the city council, so I very much appreciate that. Now we will move on to communications from the public. I just want to explain it a little bit because I know a lot of you don't come to regular council meetings. It can be confusing. So if you've signed up, you will have 5 minutes to speak. I'm going to be fairly strict on the 5 minutes just so we can keep the meeting moving. But if you do want to speak and you didn't sign up, when we get to the subject matter you are interested in, you can simply raise your hand and one of us hopefully will see you and we'll recognize you, and at that time you can also speak. So does that cover pretty much everything? Just want to kind of clarify that. So we will begin with Amber Johnson. Please state your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Amber Johnson, 3870 Mount Vernon Boulevard, Norton, Ohio. I've been a resident for 28 years. I am on the ballot in November for mayor. I'm going to have a meet and greet in July, on July 20th at the community center, which sits right behind the fire station, between 5:30 and 8:30. I hope to see a lot of the residents come out and meet me because a lot of people really haven't met me. I have worked for the city of Norton for 20 years behind the scenes, so that's why nobody has really seen me, but they've probably know my work. I probably did a lot of people's income tax right in the beginning when we had it in-house. So maybe some people do remember me, but yeah, I'm putting my hat in the ring, and I hope to see y'all out in November to vote. And appreciate you, and come see me, like I said, July 20th, between 5:30, 8:30, community center. I'll be there, and I'll be ready to shake your hand. I want to meet some of the vendors that are in Norton. I've met a lot already, and they seem to be very receptive. They're looking to see what's going to happen in the future with Norton, a lot of growth. So we're going to see what we can do. Have a good evening.
Great, thank you. Ma'am, there's chairs stacked over there. If you need a chair, we can get you one. Thank you, sir. Can you move time for me?
Yeah.
Next on the list is Aaron Burnett. Please state your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Towsley. My name is Aaron Burnett. I live at 4009 Greenwich Road. I want to again voice my frustration with issues regarding the police department. Last week, council discussed Copley and Springfield relieving our dispatch center. Mayor Zita, you stated Copley and Springfield were told if they wanted to reduce costs, they had to reduce spending. Well, the Barberton Herald reported Chief D'Alessandro was the one disciplined for $200,000 budget mismanagement in dispatch. That was reported June 10th of 2021. Would you continue doing business with a partner that ran a $200,000 budget shortfall? I mean, it's pure incompetence. And you hired him after he retired. Now, 4 officers have left the department since December. 3 full-timers and 1 part-timer. And Mayor Zia, I get it. I really do, and respectfully.
Okay.
Chief D'Alessandro is your cousin. He's family. But there comes a point where you cannot let the entire city suffer for bad leadership. I mean, this is a cost of $1 million in income to the city. Did the citizens of Norton have to absorb that cost? Officer Pond is one of the 3 full-time officers that resigned. He listened to the inaccurate statements about him made by Mayor Zita last week. Officer Pond is a resident, and he came to my house yesterday and gave me permission to read this letter to council. To whom it may concern, I write this letter with sadness and anger in my heart. Recently, I resigned from the City of Norton Police Department and left a career I longed for growing up. These are trying times for law enforcement officers in this country. Everywhere we turn, we face hatred, disgust, and violence. These are all things that wear on even the most seasoned veteran officers. Unfortunately, my fellow officers and I found ourselves having to watch our backs both outside the walls of the department and inside where we should have felt supported and safe. In 2021, we came together and decided enough was enough, and the dedicated officers of the City of Norton Police Department filed a 22-0 vote of no confidence in Chief D'Alessandro. This vote of no confidence was not something that came lightly for any of us. I do not believe anyone thought we would ever have to resort to this in our professional careers, but unfortunately, complaints about Chief D'Alessandro's leadership style, unethical behavior, and hostile work environment he created have gone unheard of for years. With our backs against the wall, we believed the only way to come to some sort of resolution was to file a vote of no confidence. In the following weeks and months, officers were asked to provide written examples of their complaints and concerns about Chief D'Alessandro. Several officers provided pages of written examples of wrongdoing, corruption, lying, and mistreatment involving Chief D'Alessandro. Not only were these written examples ignored, but city officials claimed to have never received these said examples. Chief D'Alessandro continued his lying, corrupt, and retaliatory behavior. Recently, the chief was involved in the deletion of an incident report that was actively being investigated by officers within the Norton Police Department. The deletion of this report was brought to the attention of city officials, and like other complaints, it was completely ignored. Chief D'Alessandro deleted a report of an active investigation, a public record, and was not even internally reprimanded. Meanwhile, 2 Norton police officers were placed on leave, dragged through the mud, even after being cleared by an extensive investigation. I refuse to work for the fear of being the next targeted officer by Chief D'Alessandro. Officers come to work every day walking on eggshells for fear of being written up for minuscule things, but the leader of the department is never held accountable for his actions. Unfortunately, it appears the city is protecting the chief, but at what cost? 3 officers have left the department in approximately 6 months. 3 officers making $80,000+ per year in a very safe and supportive city have resigned. I cannot speak for the other 2 officers, but I refuse to continue to work for corrupt city officials that do not support their officers or even care about the officers' expressed concerns. I have no doubt that excuses are being made for why these 3 dedicated, experienced police officers have abruptly left the department. But let it be known, police officers do not leave well-paying jobs with supportive residents and great benefits for no reason at all. Police officers leave departments and choose to start over because of poor leadership and lack of support from within. As I bring this letter to a close, I cannot help but think of how the 3 of us will be replaced by bodies at some point in time. Though we will be physically replaced, it's difficult to replace 30+ years of combined law enforcement experience. I have chosen to write this letter in hopes that it will bring light the issues plaguing the police department. As a result, as a resident, I am concerned that more and more well-trained and experienced officers will resign from the department, leaving an inexperienced and understaffed organization to protect us. I hope this letter sparks change for the better. Once you compromise your integrity or your ethics, you can never get that back. Sincerely, Officer Josh Pond. I know my time is up. Again, thank you, Mr. Towsley. I have signed copies of Officer Pond's letter for each member of council and a copy to be added to the meeting minutes for Mrs. McCumber. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Terry Seeberger.
Yes, I'm actually here on the JLP rezoning, so when it's time for that, Jim will speak
Okay.
first, and then I'll follow him.
Okay, so we will do that when we speak about the resolution specifically.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Tammy Taylor, please give your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Tammy Taylor. I live at 3285 Clubside Drive, Norton. My husband and I have been residents in Norton now 20 years. I am not on the list of across the street from the development, but I literally live right across from the service road from the development on Clubside. I work from home. I've worked from home for almost 11 years now. I work for a managed care company. And I will tell you that you know, we're at the planning committee, and we talked about what if a development moved in of families. Well, that's okay. Kids are supposed to play and cry and scream and have fun. That's what kids are for. However, while the development has been being cleared, I live across, so I've got large construction equipment tearing up my yard. I stop them and say, you know, you tore up my yard. Nothing. I've got pictures I've shared with council. They leave machinery in the road. There's mud. You know, the destruction is there. It's a nuisance. It's noise, and I can only imagine what will happen as construction and all 51 acres are developed into an industrial complex. And with that, I work in business. I've been a manager and a leader for the last 30-some years. So it kind of interested me when the attorney for Mr. Little spoke about 400 jobs in the city of Norton. And I was kind of curious because I work as a nurse in managed care, and I thought, wow, where are these people coming from? Because you go to McDonald's and there's no staff. There's no staff. Unless he has a wonderful recruitment plan, my concern is, like my neighbors, that we are going to have industrial complexes sitting empty, increasing the crime and the nuisance of our neighborhoods. You know, I am going to speak for my neighbors who aren't here. They're out of town. But, you know, we were at the Planning Commission, and they had lots of what-ifs because they're right beside where the construction's going to be. And, you know, they were belittled because they kept saying, well, what if it takes our water or our electric, or there's lights all night long? Those are real concerns that the neighborhood, when we sit out on the street and we talk about what are we going to do when this happens, not all of us are going to be able to move. So I just want to voice my concern that our residential neighborhood is turning into an industrial complex. And again, I'm sure businesses around Norton and all the neighboring areas would love to know what their recruitment and retention plans are going to be for 400 employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Cook, and I can't read your last name because I've got writing over it, so I apologize.
It's Kuzmic,
Kuzmix.
but thank you for knowing the Cook part.
Please forgive me.
If you remember my dad, I apologize.
If Ms. Kuznick, if you don't mind, please, could you give us your address for the
Yeah,
record?
yes.
And then you will have 5 minutes.
I live at 3656 Reimer Road.
Thank you.
I've lived on Reimer Road for 50 years, been a Norton resident all my life. So what I would like to speak about, this is about the rezoning issue, is some factors that courts have used to determine whether rezoning is illegal or invalid spot zoning. First and foremost is whether the rezoning is in accordance with the comprehensive plan. In the case of the Apple Group Limited versus Granger Township, the Ohio Supreme Court sided with Granger Township officials in their refusal to grant a change of zoning request, stating, the purpose of the requirement of Revised Code 519.02 for a comprehensive plan is to prevent piecemeal zoning and ensure that someone purchasing property will be able to determine in advance how property may be used. Now, in 2014, when Mr. Little approached a member of my family about buying this land, he was well aware of how this property was to be used and that it was zoned for residential use, as did all of the rest of us residents in this neighborhood. We have relied on Norton's current zoning plan when deciding to build or buy a house in Norton. If you know that there's an industrial complex near a property and you buy it, that's fine, but that's not the case here. Residents in this area purchased property believing that their investment in residential property was being protected by the comprehensive zoning plan that's been adopted by the city of Norton. A second factor courts have looked at is determine if piecemeal or spot zoning has occurred, is whether the rezoning constitutes the granting of special privileges to just one person, while undermining the pre-existing rights and uses of the adjacent property owners. The requirements to comply with existing zoning regulations, building codes, or any city ordinances should not depend on your net worth, how much property you own in the city of Norton, or who you are. We are all entitled to equal treatment under the law. Another factor in determining spot zoning is where the request creates drastically different zoning from the surrounding properties, projecting an inharmonious land use pattern. The greater the disparity, the more likely the rezoning is held to be illegal. Fourth is whether the rezoning is beneficial or detrimental to the neighbors and community. In one case, the court ruled that generalized benefits resulting from increased business did not offset the potential harm to neighbors caused by the influx of heavy truck traffic into a residential neighborhood. One scientific study on the detrimental effects of industrial development in residential areas found that while warehouses or distribution centers provide vital services, poorly planned projects can cause harm to neighborhoods and to the environment due to adverse health effects from diesel exhaust, excessive truck traffic on neighborhood streets, disturbing levels of noise, and property value decline. Another factor used in determining spot zoning is the physical attributes of the site. The suitability of the land for development, the topography, soil types, wetlands, and flood areas are things that need to be considered in the rezoning phase. Now, Mr. Little's maps over here are misleading in that they completely disregard the actual physical attributes of this tract of land. When my grandparents bought this property in 1937, they named it Cold Springs Poultry Farm. It was named for the several natural springs that were on the property. The interior of this property contains steep ravines that collect runoff after heavy rains, and spring-fed creeks, ponds, and swamps. All this water eventually flows into Van Heining Run on the eastern edge of the property. Now, I'm no expert on wetlands, but I am concerned about what an environmental disaster Mr. Little's plans will be for an industrial complex, and it will cause the disruption in the ability of water to run off from upstream properties. In addition, Mr. Little's maps also disregard the fact that there are 2 buried gas pipelines on this property. Nothing can be built on these pipelines, not even trees can grow on them. So in conclusion, the Fordham Law Review defines illegal spot zoning as the process of singling out a parcel of land for a use classification totally different from that of the surrounding area for the benefit of the owner of such property and to the detriment of others. This rezoning request fits that definition in every way. Thank you.
Thank you. June Guzzo? Did I get that right? Sorry if I didn't.
Well, there's 2, Guzzo Keeling.
If you could please give your address.
Yeah, 3500 Reimer Road.
Thank you.
And I'm here speaking, basically, I'm right beside the access road, and Van Heining Run runs right through my backyard, 20 yards from my deck on a catty corner. Didn't even know it was there when we bought the property until we cleared off our property. And then have done a lot of work for that water flow. We're at the lowest point of Reimer Road. So it is considered in the real estate, areas of an information that it's flood zoning, okay? So my whole point is there's so much. I've walked this land and this property that Mr. Little has purchased and everything, and there's so many. I have pictures over here of the difference of the normal Van Heining Run creek that runs through my yard, and then when the land is disturbed or hard rains and the ravines are disturbed, we have nothing but like waterfalls. My whole backyard turns into a pond, okay? We've had to put in crocks, but yet we chose to live there and maintain that to protect our home and the property. But now the disturbance of these underground springs, there's been backhoes brought in, dug alongside of the access road to make a complete valley to run right into Van Heining Run, which runs right through my yard. The culvert in the ditch and on this property gets plugged up from the debris from all the big ravines, you know, things. They dug a latrine through the property, so then again, it's like waterfall. You can see it loud and clear here, how much water that comes from that property. And that's just what, you know, it's a normal flow, Mother Nature. There's nothing that can be done except for the disturbance of these underground springs, which are all through this property. You know, it's been fighting this, but yet it's kind of like, it's not conducive for, you know, a project of this without Mother Nature. Where's this gonna go? Where's it gonna go? Van Heining Run hasn't been cleaned out, except for us residents have to do it on our own. And you guys know that where it runs to. And I see the water projects down here on Cleveland-Maslin Road, you know, and things like that. It's kind of like, where's the tax dollars gonna go with all that water issue too? You know? So it's just a fight with, you know, the concerns of, yes, these projects are going, you know, business is business, but you know, how it affects the residential area that this was, you know, farmland. It was architectural. Now all of a sudden it's come to this industrial business land in the middle of nowhere, you know. So I don't support it for the fact that it just doesn't, you know, it's not beneficial for Mother Nature in the sense of all this water. What are we gonna do with it? Are we gonna suffer without, for the benefit of a project? Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Little, did you want to speak now or did you want to wait? So if you could please state your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Jim Little, 920 Rosemary Circle, Wadsworth, Ohio. I'm the owner of the property, owner of JLP Development. It's in thinking back on our last meeting and preparing for this one, I felt like the thing that was most concerning to folks here was knowing more about me so they could determine or get their impression of what they thought I would do or wouldn't do or what I'd done in the past. So with that, I can't tell you what I'm going to do because I don't know what zoning I'm going to wind up with, aside from what I've got starting off. So I'm obviously trying to change that and move that to a different classification. That would, in fact, affect what I would propose to do. So let me just start off reading this. I've given this to City Council. I've got a copy of it for the Planning Commission to review, and you can question me on any of it. I'm here today to follow through on my request for I-1 zoning for the property previously described. I understand that it may be unprecedented that the City Council would vote to approve a zoning change counter to the recommendation of the Planning Commission. However, I'm asking you to consider I-1 zoning. And I got some bullet points here with a few comments to it. Location. I feel the highest and best use of the property we are discussing now and for the foreseeable future is I-1 development, primarily due to its proximity to the highway with very few homes nearby. Property size. The combined parcels provide for the opportunity for large buildings more likely to attract and support needs for acquiring utilities. Building size. Big buildings usually offer more employment opportunities for higher wages and higher tax business income earnings, all helping Norton homeowners and helping the city with paying Norton infrastructure expenses. Traffic. I-1 industrial zoning would have trucks traveling shorter distance off and on the highway, likely fewer cars than B3 or a housing development would have in this location. Best suited business for this land would be businesses that need highway exposure and or highway conveniences, willing to pay a premium for highway location, therefore not competing with the Norton City Industrial Park 2+ miles off the highway. I like the Norton City Industrial Park. I believe it will not be affected by this added development because it is a much different product offered at a much lower cost to businesses not needing highway exposure and proximity. So, as I started off saying, the only way to give insight into where I hope to go with this zoning request is to share a few highlights of where I've been. And bear with me here, and I'll try to make it quick for you. Started off in 1969 through 1988. And I've got many other things I've done along the way, but I'm just going to give you a little flavor for it. Joined my father in the founding of Spartan Enterprises, a local rubber recycling company with national and international business activities, still operating very successful today. 1988 to 2012. Bought the Ohio Match Company property in Wadsworth with a business partner. We demolished and repurposed the property, which is over 100 years old, into warehousing and light industrial. 725,000 square feet and 25 acres. I sold my partnership interest after nearly 25 years to my business partner's son, and that business is still operating very successfully today. 1987, bought out my father's interest in Spartan Enterprise and became 100% owner. My past and present experience in property development. Purchased land on Norton Avenue from the Cleveland Catholic Diocese, which was packaged and sold, and today is the successful Stonewick neighborhood. And at the time was the first new major subdivision in the city of Norton for many years. With a business partner, I bought and sold the land that today houses the Chapel of Green in the city of Green, a successful megachurch. Number 3, bought the entire New Haven undeveloped property package from the City of Barberton Community Foundation. This property started as a very large development by Forest City Industries. It didn't work out, was sold to 3 other developers who didn't complete it. I put together a partnership, purchased the land, developed the plans for the east side of Fairland Road, 156 new home lots, resized 20 old original lots, and also now I'm developing 30 new lots across the street from Clinton Aluminum on the west side. I expect to have this huge project completed in 2025, subject to the economic impact of new housing sales. Over the years, I purchased additional property on Clark Mill Road, packaged it, and I'm in the process of developing Cider Ridge, which is 108 single-family home lots with Ryan Homes building the homes. So I guess my point here is I've been a part of, started, led, owned, and still own many investment partnerships. I'm thankful for all the trust others have placed in me to afford me these many challenging and incredibly successful opportunities. I enjoy giving back by helping others interested in business, standing up for what I believe, and don't plan to change the simple principles and persistence that has guided me for years in many entrepreneurial successes. I hope this helps all of you who are concerned and will help you consider trusting me and my team of professionals and experienced partners. My support team also includes my 3 Eagle Scout sons, who are business educated, experienced, trustworthy, successful, and together financially capable of handling this project if opportunity presents. This rezoning really shouldn't be a hard decision if folks are willing to get out of their own shadows and see how the world is changing around them and jump on board. A drive through neighboring cities like Greene shows a great example of what Norton could aspire to be. Beautiful industrial buildings, often coexisting and complementing existing neighbors. Please take the time to review Greene's comprehensive land use plans that I'm providing as a resource for ideas for Norton's development. In addition, please take the time to visit Greene's website, which shows great examples of leadership and professionalism. I would appreciate your support for approval of I-1 zoning so we can help make this opportunity a success story for all of us to share rather than miss out on having to settle for a less income opportunity to support the city's growth. It's time to harvest a few trees and truly be a growing community. Respectfully submitted for consideration, Jim. I sincerely thank all of you, the audience as well. If you want to take time to look at the map over there, it's the same map I brought the first time, a little smaller version on the right. The one on the left, the only change to it is, for those that didn't see it the first time around, the orange dots represent the people I talked to before our last meeting. The green dots on those orange dots are people I actually spoke with. And lastly, the red flags on the left, right, and throughout indicate the folks that are registered to speak at the last meeting. There's no comments there. There's just address correlations there with who spoke from where and who's leading the comments in this discussion. And I'll be doing the same after this meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up would be Dwayne and Stephanie Welton. I'm sorry, I gotta go by the order of the list.
Okay,
You said you wanted to go when we
Yeah.
actually spoke about the resolution.
okay, that's fine. I guess I thought I was gonna follow Jim, but I'll wait.
You can go now, but I've gotta limit you to 5 minutes.
You
if
can
go
limit
now,
me to-
Or if you wait till then, I can just give you the floor. That's up to you.
I'm gonna try and keep it within 5 minutes. First of all, I'm Terry Seeberger. I'm from North Canton, Ohio. I'm an attorney. I was here at the last meeting. Even though I represent Jim Little as a property owner, I'm actually typically a representative of communities like yours. I'm a planning commission member. I'm a health district board member. I'm a law director for Strasburg and Navarre, and I also do outside legal work for Massillon, and I also am the counsel for the 3-county Joint Solid Waste District. 2 of the 5 Planning Commission members did vote to recommend the proposed rezoning, and that was in spite of the very large crowd in opposition. In my opinion, the fear of the unknown appeared to be a driver at that meeting, together with what I call maybe imagining a worst case assumption as to what light industrial means. Some concerns I heard were a loss of semi-rural character, especially north of Wadsworth Road, fear of noise and light, changed water flow, and a fear of being forced potentially to tie into water and sewer. As you heard, Jim takes everything very seriously. I also heard about spot zoning tonight. I'm just an attorney and I'm just a 30-year zoning guy. I don't think that a multi-parcel rezone is an illegal spot zone. Most of the concerns overlook that rezoning is but the first step in the process of developing a project. The following steps would include that Jim would have to procure approval of a major site plan from Planning Commission. He would have to procure approvals from other government agencies to address things such as environmental concerns, water flow, etc. And that requirement of obtaining an approvable site plan and other approvals will provide the neighbors, I believe, all the protections that they are concerned they would not have. As for water and sewer hookup, I understand Summit County would not require any homeowner to hook up to water and sewer simply because they happen to be there, and that is consistent with what Stark County does, which is where I do most of my work. The law does strongly favor an owner's right to develop land subject only to reasonable regulation. After the last meeting, I took a look at the 2006 comprehensive plan that a couple of you folks have provided to me, and that was an attempt by Norton at the time to look into the future. And 17 years later, it may be time to even look further into the future. But the City of Greene, you'll see their plans is a more recent example of what you could do. Nevertheless, the 2006 plan noted that part of the land south of Wadsworth Road going down to the highway is already zoned B3, and on page 57, map number 9, your 2006 comprehensive plan appears to recommend that B3 district be extended all the way down to Route 224. This would take in almost all of the territory in the southern rezone that Jim seeks to rezone to I-1. When you compare the permitted B3 and I-1 uses, I would ask two questions. One, which is more compatible with nearby residential districts? Well-designed and low-impact I-1, or B3 that potentially could include motels, service stations, and auto sales? Second question, given that most of the proposed rezone district, I'm talking about the southern one in particular, backs up to the freeways without direct access and is behind residential areas, could this district even be profitably developed as B3? Or for that matter, could it be economically developed as R1 residential other than with housing development? A well-designed I-1 in the area adjacent to the freeways and suitably screened from the nearby residential zones is the kind of use that you'll see often in the city of Greene, and I might add that in Stark County, where I do work, that's done frequently, and I've been involved in that, and it's successful.
Mr. Seeberger, if you could wrap it up shortly.
I will.
Thank you.
Okay, well then I'll just wrap up by saying my comments apply equally to the northern rezone district, and respectfully I ask that council, when you meet after a public hearing, reconsider the Planning Commission recommendation on each application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Dwayne and Stephanie Welton. Did you want to speak separately? Because I can.
No, it doesn't make any difference.
If you could please give your name and address.
Yeah, Dwayne and Stephanie Welton, 3585 Wadsworth Road. Our property butts up on the east side of the property that he's planning on developing going north of Wadsworth Road. I think there's so much deception. It's just like when we were at the planning commission meeting. They had asked how many employees would probably be in these buildings and everything, and I think the grand total kind of came out to be about 400 people. The next night, we had taken a picture of the drawing and everything, and I started to look at some of the layouts and everything. One building right next to 224 has 240 parking spots. Now, if you take that and figure on 20 more buildings, we're talking over 4,000 parking spots here, and all these things are going to come right out on Wadsworth Road. Now, his attorney just made comments about the fact of protecting the people that already live there, that have their houses and everything. And it kind of amazes me that he can actually say that when Mr. Little stood in our driveway when he came over to introduce himself and stated that he wanted to be a good neighbor. It amazes me when he explained what buildings he wanted to do and what his ideas were. My wife said, well, where would you plan on putting these buildings? And he said, I'm going to put them as close to your property line as I possibly can. That, to me, is not being a good neighbor. Again, we came here for the green space. We came here because we liked the fact that it was a bedroom community. We've been here 34 years now. I guess we kind of got lucky for 34 years that we looked at nothing but a massive growth of trees and woods and everything else, which disappeared in 1 week. And now we're faced with all the wind and the noise and everything coming off 21 right onto our property. Obviously, we're concerned about the lighting. We're concerned our property value is going to be crushed. There's no doubt about that. I mean, when you think about anybody coming to buy a piece of property, and we have just put a ton of money into this house, that's going to literally have an 85,000 square foot building, potentially 20 feet off of our property line. The building would start at the back edge of our house, 20 feet beyond our driveway, and extend beyond our property line, and possibly 3 stories high. You know, we're never going to see sunlight in the afternoon. We're never going to have darkness at night because it's going to be lit up like Summit Mall. I don't think anybody's against economic development if it's in the right place. And this is not the right place. I mean, when you look at Reimer Road, you look at Clubside, and I know we're on Wadsworth Road, we're on a main road and everything, but this is dead center in nothing but a residential area. And again, for me to stand out there, or us to stand out there and work on our yards and everything this over the last few weekends when it's not raining, to think of a building of that size to be right next door to our property and no setback rules, no anything, no mounds, no nothing. I mean, had he left a variety of the trees to have some kind of a separation between residential to commercial, it might have been one thing. But there's nothing there to protect any of the homeowners. When you look at the one homeowner on Clubside Drive on the right-hand side at the very end, he is surrounded on all three sides by this project. It's just not right. It's not right for anybody on Reimer. It's not right for anybody on Wadsworth Road. You've got everything east of Barber Road down on Wadsworth Road. It's already literally industrial. Barber Road. I mean, there's certain places. You've already started this complex out with Clinton Aluminum and everything. This is not the place to put it. And it's not, I was so glad to see so many people show up for the Planning Commission meeting and to realize that nobody is in favor of this project. There's a right and a wrong place for it, and this is not the right place. It's gonna kill, I mean, we're both 60 years old. You know, we hope to live and die in this property, you know, because we enjoy Norton. Our kids all went to Norton. And it's just, you know, I've already called friends of mine that are in real estate and everything else and said, look, should we go ahead and get out now? And they said, you might as well forget it. You're going to have to disclose. The property's already been cleared of every twig there is, and there's nobody that's going to buy your property. And it's not just me. I mean, when you look at all the people on Clubside, and you look at even the people that are downhill from us going towards Van Heining Run, I don't care what you do with retention ponds and everything else, there is no way that you're going to stop all the runoff from creating more of a problem than what they already have. The one lady that lives on Wadsworth Road right next to it, she's already lost one vehicle in her garage because of the fact that Van Heining flooded and came up over the floorboards and wiped out the computer in her car. And it's the Peterman property, and that property floods constantly. Any additional runoff is going to kill everything down there. But when you look at 20 buildings with the trash and the stuff that you know is going to be blowing around, and I checked, I was out of curiosity, with the millions and millions of dollars that Akron has spent on widening and doing all the work that they did on Romig Road to accommodate
Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon. They have 5,000 employees. They made all those changes and widened all the roads so those people could get in and out, get to 76, get to Viodum, to get to 77. Is Norton going to do the same thing, or are they going to say, okay, let's take Wadsworth Road, let's go ahead and add 2 more lanes to it down in this area. So now we're going to take people's front yards and ruin their property values even more. It just seems like there's so many other places that this thing could possibly work. And again, nobody's in opposition to economic development. It's just find the right place for it where you're not going to affect people. He talks about how many few houses there are that are going to be affected by it. I don't care if it's one. I mean, it's a person, that's the biggest investment you've made in your entire life. And to see somebody like this with that much money to come in and not care at all about the existing homeowners, it just blows my mind that anybody would even consider allowing this to go forward. So I'm just hoping and praying that everybody here can put yourselves in the homeowners' places and help protect us. I mean, when he stood in our driveway and said, well, would you rather see a bunch of screaming kids and houses be put up next to you? I said, you're darn right. I said, I'd be thrilled to see that. I said, with that, it's not going to kill the value of my house. But you go putting a building up like you're talking about, or a complex like that, it's just going to make people not want to come to Norton. Because they're going to say, well, my God, if they did it here, where else are they going to do it again? You know, it's just not that, if I wanted to live in Montrose or I wanted to live in Greene, I would live in Greene. But I came here because I like the fact that it's open spaces, it's bigger pieces of property for the houses and everything. It's a nice, quiet community. Now you're turning it into Kenmore. So I'm just hoping that people think about the homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Vince, and Vince, out of respect to you, I don't want to try to...
It's just magazine.
Magazine, okay.
Yeah, it's real easy. Vince Magazine, 3282 Wadsworth Road. I moved here, built my house when was still the village of Loyal Oak. It's changed a lot, and I just don't want to see this end of 261 look like the east side of 261. All it is dumps, trash, and mulch companies. I mean, he might do better than that, but he speaks of Spartan Rubber. I grew up in Barberton, and I moved here for the green space. Spartan Rubber is an eyesore. It's a wooden fence surrounded by tractor trailers. You drive on that corner, it looks horrible, and it hasn't changed in 50 years, because I'm 52. So it hasn't changed. So I don't want to see that corner by me change. I mean, if you want to buy some cheap farmland and then try to rezone it, and that's what he's trying to do. You bought a bunch of cheap farmland, now you want to rezone it and make money. And, you know, you say also about the traffic, like Mr. Welton said about traffic, you're going to get a lot of traffic on our road. It hasn't been paved in 15 years. It's breaking apart. It's horrible. I've called. They patch the holes, which that's the best you guys can do, but it needs paved. So what's going to happen when you build a complex like that? Who's going to maintain it? Because it's not getting maintained now. And now we got even more truck traffic from Amazon, and it's even worse. So that's really all I have to say, because Mr. Walton hit a lot of the key points. So that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. That is everybody who signed up, but we do have a couple of letters, so the clerk will read those 2 letters next.
This is an email that was received from Ruth Ninduff on Sunday, April 30th at 12 o'clock p.m. There are so many questions and concerns about the proposed development of the properties in Ward 1. It seems like we are being bullied into accepting development on the properties. The trees were cleared and lots regraded without any regard as to the effects of this action on the surrounding farms and existing neighbors. Our soil is mostly clay, which can only absorb a limited amount of water before all the rainwater just runs off into areas that are already have flooding issues. This flooding will only get worse when the properties have a hard surface lot that can't absorb any water. Obviously, there are design problems with many areas in our city, and this project will probably make the matters worse for our friends and neighbors in Ward 1. Engineers designed Barber Road, and it is closed many times a summer because of the flooding. At some point in time, all the road water from Wadsworth Road west of me was diverted into a creek that runs through my property. Growing up on this property, we used to be able to step across the creek to visit the neighbors. With all the additional water being diverted, the creek now turns into a raging river when it rains. Many parts of the creek are now 6 foot wide and about 10 foot deep. What remedies are available to me, and how will additional runoff from a development affect my property? Do I have to just wait and watch my home fall into the creek? Reimer Road has posted that no truck traffic is allowed. Does this mean all the additional traffic will be suffered by the residents on Wadsworth Road? Will the road have to be widened to accommodate the extra traffic? Is the bridge over 21 wide enough and safe enough for additional use by trucks and cars? The intersection at Hametown and Wadsworth Road is a real problem. It's difficult to turn onto Wadsworth Road now with the existing traffic. With the exit ramps from 21 and the gas station exit so close, it is difficult to see oncoming traffic and safely turn onto Wadsworth Road. An additional access road for ODOT will cause more safety issues. I'm not sure why ODOT built in their current location, knowing that getting onto the existing Route 21 would be challenging. So much wildlife has already been displaced. How will the additional light pollution, noise pollution, and pollution from industry affect the remaining wildlife and our neighborhood? We all have wells and septic systems on our properties. Is the new water tower going to provide water to the development? How will the development affect the current water table that supports our wells? How will sewage be handled for the new development? Will we be forced into additional expenses to support a new development? Hopefully some studies and information will be forthcoming soon. Ruth Ninduff, 3517 Wadsworth Road, Norton, Ohio. This letter is dated April 11th, 2023, written by Lisa Merrick, 3088 Hametown Road, Norton, Ohio, 44203. Dear Norton City Council members administration, and concerned citizens. My name is Lisa Merrick, and I have lived at 3088 Hametown Road in Norton. It has come to my attention that several parcels of land have been purchased nearby my home between Reimer Road and Akron Wadsworth Road. Questions arose early on when parcel number 4602570 was entirely denuded of precious trees. Now, after the fact, Norton citizens are finally aware of what is proposed to take place, and I am writing to state my utter and complete opposition. My dad bought the house at 3088 in 1960. I grew up in it and inherited the same house 60 years later. I have fond memories growing up in my neighborhood. We had a field next door with pheasants and rabbits. The field across the street was an apple orchard. I remember the smell of lilacs wafting into my bedroom window at night while listening to the chirp of crickets and katydids. All of that has disappeared. Across from me now are a complex of storage units, brick and concrete, with vehicles coming and going at all hours. 2 homes popped up in the field next door, also taking out trees and the sound of spring peepers. The insect sounds have been replaced by roaring trucks and obnoxious revving motorcycles, not to mention cars whizzing by what used to be a quiet residential street. The corner of Hametown Road and 261 is a nightmare at any given time throughout the day and evening. I can no longer leave my windows open during the day, and especially during the night, because of the noise and the smell of exhaust. Allowing the parcels on 261 and Reimer Road to be rezoned to industrial or commercial will add not only more noise, light, and air pollution, it will increase the already overburdened roadways and create massive havoc at an intersection that is already dangerous and an almost impossible place to make a safe left turn. On parcel number 4600742, I was told that a beautiful century home is being torn down and replaced with light, noise, and pollution. The home that stands there now was originally the Bennett Farm, and the house was built in 1853 prior to the Civil War. It also has a historically significant story attached to the area. At one time, a Native American man, still in this area, called a magnificent oak tree on the property his loyal friend, hence the name given to one of our 7 hamlets, Loyal Oak. I understand that Norton wants to move forward, attracting businesses to add to the tax base and encouraging families to live here. Yet what I considered a loved and cherished city is being destroyed in the name of progress. I published 2 historical books on the Norton community, not realizing that I would come to witness. I am certainly not proud of some of the decisions being made regarding our land. I don't consider it progress. Progress for some is at the expense of others who will lose the value of their beloved homes or to give up and exist next to a nightmare they never envisioned. Please consider this decision wisely. Do we unnecessarily need to hurt and anger the citizens who have invested in their community for years? At what point do we say no and value the people who have worked hard and maintained their homes only to make a decision to move or live in anger over what has happened to their space, privacy, and comfort? Sincerely, Lisa Merrick.
Thank you. That is what we had for communications of the public. As I said earlier, when we move on to committee of the whole, you're more than welcome to join in our conversation after we speak with a simple raising of your hand. So we will move on to committee of the whole. Letter A, PC R3 2023, Mr. DeHartpark.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is PCR 2023. This is for JLP development rezoning from R1 to I1. This is for parcels between Reimer Road and Wadsworth Road. Parcel number 6202570, 4604611, 4607487, 4600742, and 4608956. This is just for the rezoning of the property. This is something that council needs to discuss and make a motion to move forward Does anybody have anything that they'd like to add to this? Ms. Whipke or Mr. Biggs?
Thank you, Mr. DeHartpark. Just for the public's interest and to refresh their memories, this is for a total of 60.434 acres running from Wadsworth Road to Reimer Road. 16 contiguous properties are affected, directly affected. That's not including everyone else that's would be affected. And the Planning Commission did deny this application by a vote of 3-2. And then it comes before us. I had a lot of questions on this thing as far as that goes. Just looking at some of the paperwork on here, I was kind of confused about the address it was given as being, I think it was 3414 Middleton Road in Barberton. Exactly where's that? Because I could not find it. I could find a Middleton, I think, in Hudson, but for the address, yeah, listed on here. And
You're looking at me, you're talking to me?
it was that was given as your address, yes, Mr. Little.
That's certainly not correct. I've given my address to
If you could come to the microphones, just so people at home can hear what you're back and forth.
No, that's certainly not correct.
It's listed more than once.
Do you want to see it, Mr. Little?
Sure.
This is the application that was received.
My attorney in the law firm completed that application as we stated previously in the meeting before. I can only assume that it's a typo, but it's certainly not an address that I own or occupy or have anything to do with.
Would that be the attorney that's representing you now?
Yes.
Okay.
So he may have, he stepped out, he had a call there. I can ask him, if you give me a minute to ask, or we can come back to it. Let's come back to it, and we'll find out. We'll get an answer for you. But the first answer is, it's not my address. Okay?
Thank you. With that being stated, it is before us. We can't just leave it like this, and I'm going to go back to Mr. Markey. Mr. Markey, if we were to not move this forward, we would have X amount of days to do something with it or not?
So the charter requires a public hearing to be held and then a vote by council within 90 days of the public hearing. And there are notice requirements on the public hearing, which I know Ms. McComber is very familiar with because she does those notices frequently, so.
For the public's clarification.
For the public notice, yeah.
If
for
we
the-
don't move on it, then would the Planning Commission's recommendation just automatically be accepted?
It's not necessarily how it works under the charter, no.
Not because it was denied?
Well, yeah, it's complicated. The language is not the clearest, so I can, I'll refer back to my email that I sent, and I can probably follow up with another email. I don't want to get too much into it on the floor of council.
Right.
Yeah.
So, my opinion, Ms. Wiki, is what you're saying is, it can't sit where it's sitting right now. It needs to get moved from this work session to regular council to get discussed over a 3-week period. After 2 weeks, it will become a public hearing, which the public can come and voice more of their concerns, which you guys have already done a very good job at. So we really don't have a choice. We have to move it.
No. As far as I'm concerned, you're welcome to come every week and voice your concerns.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, that's basically what it is. And there's only the two of us here tonight to move it forward.
Right. So based off that, knowing we really have to do it anyways, I'll make a motion to move PCR 3-2023 to next week's council for a first reading only.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. I'll ask for further discussion, and I will start with the further discussion. So I have heard what the residents have said, and I do agree the city has an awful lot of industrial places already set aside. I know my personal philosophy is I was elected to represent you, and that is a big part of the job, is representing the residents, so your voices are very strong to me. It carries a lot of weight. I would have to be convinced pretty strongly otherwise that this wouldn't harm residents. I have concerns with utilities in the future, and I know it was stated that you do not have to tie into sewers. That's kind of true, but not totally true. Once your septic system fails, you do have to tie into the sewers, and the timing of that, who knows? I just want that to be clear to the public so they understand that. So as of right now, I am not in a position to support this.
I just want everybody to know, we are aware of the water issues there. We are aware of personal losses as to what it is. And after we get done with these two, actually, I'm going to bring up something that I'd like to be looked into for future and would sincerely ask our solicitor to look into it and see what we can come up with. So maybe we don't get this thrown at us as abruptly and as ugly as we have this time.
And I'll just add, I've spent a ton of time with a lot of you guys on the phone, text message, emails, and I am pro economic development. I want to see Norton grow. I want to see Norton be successful. We have areas that we set in place in certain areas to protect the investment of the residents in this city. There's zoning for a reason. If you buy a property, you look at the zoning, and that's what it is. It's not fair to the residents to change the zoning. There's no infrastructure, there's no sewer, there's no water, there's no roads to support it. The only thing I see is more of a bottleneck and lives getting lost at 261 in Hametown, so I am not in favor at all.
No, even in this case, the last time that we'd actually rezoned the parkland property, the businesses was already there. The infrastructure was there. That was chosen to keep it where it was, because where were we going to put it inside the city? There were some residents involved. Thankfully, most of them weren't ours. A lot were Barberton, and it's not my job to take care of Barberton. My sole concern is the residents of Norton and what affects them and how. Sure, we want to see manufacturing come, we want to see different jobs come that supposedly takes the tax burden off the people. I haven't seen it yet, but maybe someday somebody will. I won't live that long. Hopefully some of you will. So I'm not, I think most of you know how I feel about green space, and when it disappears, I don't like it. I made a sacrifice once for it, and I'm not inclined to do it again, especially under these circumstances.
So there is a motion and a second on the floor. Yes, ma'am, please. If you could come forward and give your name and address. And thank you for speaking up, because I didn't see you. And you have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Sarah Justice, 3561 Reimer. So just some points that Mr. Little himself brought up today. He named quite a few things that he has developed. The majority are housing developments. He has said that this property is more suitable for this industrial, but he's never given a good concrete reason as to why. So I'm asking, why is it unsuitable for residential? Is it the topography of the land? Is it that there are wetlands and springs there? Is the housing market drying up, so he thinks that he'll make more money with the business park? As it was already said, Reimer does have the no truck sign, and it is enforced. I've also noticed quite a few city trucks over the past year down on Reimer looking into the culverts and the creek on that side of the street. They do say City of Norton Service Department. Not 100% sure why they're doing that, but I did actually go out and talk to one once. My dad did once, and so did my husband, 3 different times. They all said they were checking the water flow and that Reimer was prone to flooding now. We already have Barber Road with the gates on it. We don't need another one in the city. And then one thing that just kind of sat a little bit wrong with me here when Mr. Little said he took and put red flags where everyone talked on that map. Is that intimidation? Is that threats? What's he trying to accomplish by that? I'm not going to silence some of us. So I thank Ms. Whipke and Mr. DeHarpart, who were at the Planning Commission. I thank you for listening. And Mr. Towsley, thank you also for what you're saying. But with where I work, I take a big risk by standing up here and talking to you guys. And again, I thank you for listening, but it's important to me because I have a 64-acre farm lot in the city directly across the street from this. If the property values go down, you know it's going to get bought up by a developer. I'd like to keep it a farm. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I move on with the vote, is anybody else out there want to address council? Yes, ma'am, please. If you could give your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Hey, it's Brittany Vestal, 3523 Wadsworth Road. I spoke at the other hearing, so I'm not going to repeat a bunch of stuff, but I did, a lot of us have concerns about the flooding and everything that's happened, and of course, Mr. Little got up here and wanted to talk about his exemplary business record. And I think I asked last time, like, can we raise our hands if we've got water retention or more water? So has anyone been contacted? Has he tried to fix any of the runoff water in the time since the last meeting? So he said he knew how. His lawyer said that they understand how all of this works with the ponds and the berms and everything. And he knows because he's talked to all of us and he's been at the meetings that there's flooding, but he's not made any amends to fix it on himself, so people are gonna have to hire a lawyer and take him to civil court. And thank you for reflecting everyone's views of your constituents and hearing us out. I just wanted to see if there'd been any updates in the flooding from the clear cutting, and I'm not gonna repeat the concerns, like mainly with the water and the sewage and the roads widening, and that we all moved here to have. I moved here 5 years ago to Wadsworth, and I spent 2 years before we purchased a home. My neighbors are here. Ruth's lived here her whole life. So we've lived here 4 years now. We took a long time to decide where we bought property, and we really have liked it here. And thank everyone for, letting us have our tiny little farm. I wish we had the acreage that our neighbors have back behind us, but, we've got 3 and a few sheep, and nobody wants to buy eggs or meat from a tiny farm located behind an industrial zone. So please think about our welfare as well as everyone else with the families when you consider this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Please give your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Dan Newman, 3172 Cleveland Masson Road, Norton.
You said Dan Newman?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I would like to readdress what Ms. Whipke was asking. Why, since the Planning Commission did not want this to go forward, she said, what would happen if we didn't try to move it forward? And the man in the red shirt said, I don't want to go into all that. Do we go into all that? Do we understand why they have to do something? If the Planning Commission denied it, why it has to move forward in council? I would like to understand that better.
Yeah, Planning Commission is just a recommending body, so the council is the one that actually has to act on the application. So
But if like she said, if you don't address it and just leave it hang, what happens then? And you were like, we can't do that, or we can, or we might not.
Yeah,
what would happen?
There's some technicalities of the language in the charter, but the fact is that Planning Commission recommends, council acts. So whether they want it or didn't want it, council has the ultimate decision on whether to rezone the property. So the applicant has a right to have their application heard, and council has the final say on how that application is determined.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you, sir.
Can I
Yes, ma'am, please. I need you to state your name and address again.
It's Tammy Taylor. I live at 3285 Clubside Drive, Norton, Ohio, right across from the development on Clubside. I'm one of those dots over there. I only have one comment really to make, as I listened to Mr. Little speak about where he lived. I know where he lives because I was the DON at the nursing home in that area. That's not an industrial complex, and where he said his home is. But he and his attorney said, well, you know, what's a big deal about putting an industrial park in a residential area? I don't know. He doesn't live in an industrial park in a residential area. He lives in a very nice area, where the nursing home, when it was built years ago, I remember when Wadsworth fought to have that because they didn't want old people living in Great Oaks. So I guess that's very troubling to me, that somebody who doesn't live in my neighborhood, because it's not a wealthy neighborhood, it's a low, middle income, we work hard, we take care of our places, but you can say it doesn't have as much value, and we can put an industrial park so we can all look at it, because you don't have to live in it. And it's very troubling to me, because it makes, we take pride in what we do. And it's, and I appreciate the way you guys have all spoken up, and I appreciate the support, because I have to be honest, I didn't feel that way. And I feel like, maybe there is a chance that even though I'm a red dot over there, that I'm complaining all the time about it, that we actually will not have to look at an industrial complex out my front porch. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience before we move forward? Okay, so there's a motion and a second on the floor. Anybody up here, any further discussion? And this is to move it forward to next week. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. DeHarpart?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Before we move on to letter B, which is the other half of this, I just want to kind of explain it to the residents. So with this one, because it's passed, there will be a public hearing on May 22nd, and there will be 3 full readings, which those are every other week starting next week. So it will be 5 weeks from tonight, if things go the regular schedule, that we would be voting on both of these issues. So that being said, we'll move on to item B, PCR 4/2023. Mr. DeHarpart.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for PCR for 2023. This is GLP development rezoning from R1 to I1. And this is for the property that goes down 21 in Clubside Drive. This is for parcel numbers 4607387, 4606220, 4605516, 4607169, 4602871, 4600184. Basically, we've heard all your concerns. This is the exact same situation as the first one we discussed. I think everybody knows how the majority of council feels about this right now, and that we're here in support of what's going to benefit you guys. And that being said, this has to get moved just like the other one got moved. So I don't know if we need to have a continued discussion. It's kind of the same thing, just so you guys know. But this does as well need to get moved to next week's agenda for a first reading. So I'll make a motion to move this to next week's agenda for a first reading only.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes, Ms. Whipke.
I'd just like to point out, I'd have the same question on this parcel as far as the 3014 Middleton Road, Barberton address for Mr. Little. And I'm kind of also wondering about Mr. McCown's address. I thought he lived on Clubside, and it says Brown Street.
If you could please come to the podium.
The answer to these questions is, and I believe with respect to Jim Little, the 3014 Middleton Road is an address taken from the Ohio Secretary of State website, as I recall, for JLP. I mean, Jim Little is a person, but JLP is the applicant, but we all know who he is. The Brown Street and number 1 for William McCown, that appears on the Summit County Fiscal Officer's Auditor's website as the address to which his tax bills go. So that's how you get those addresses, and frequently it's just the way it is. So we use the addresses that are of record.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, while you're standing there, you might as well just wait.
Okay.
Also, on this particular properties, number 7 on, that would be page 35 of our thing, but it's stating this request to reclassify properties for the purpose of permitting an I-1 light industrial use for these otherwise virtually landlocked tracts. To the best of my knowledge, there is a road that goes directly back to those off of Clubside, which would hardly make them landlocked. I believe that easement, if it's even an easement, I think it belongs to Mr. Little. Now, this is what I thought he told me in a telephone conversation, and if not, he has the easement for it, so they're far from being landlocked.
Well, in my opinion, I'm the person who prepared that, and to me, that is virtually landlocked, that whole zoning territory, because you have no access directly from 21 and no access directly from 224. You have at most one access. I think it was coming from the north. I haven't memorized these properties, but I'm the person, not Jim Little. He used the word virtually. So if you're upset about that, blame me.
Oh, merrily.
Huh?
I said merrily.
Okay, got it. Not the first time.
And I just point out on this one that this is 51.07 acres running adjacent to Clubside Drive and Route 21, which I'm sure most of you all know. 14 properties are directly affected, as well as ODOT's, and numerous others would be affected by the access road that would be created coming off of Akron-Wadsworth Road as well. Thank you, I'm done.
Thank you.
Ms. Whitkey, thank you. Again, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Nobody in the audience? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Harpart?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
And this is the same process that we explained on the first one. There will be a public hearing on May 22nd.
Mr. President?
Yes, Ms. Whitkey.
I know that we're going to move on to the item C, but as I'd stated before, I wanted to kind of get it in here because it's pertinent. I don't know if there's anything we can do, but I would really seriously like it looked into, that when we have tracts of land like this, I understand people's allowed to do with their own property what they like to do, but as far as some of these developments, I think it's a way to aid them in moving forward, particularly with these two, and particularly the one taking up from one street to the other, where all the trees are cleared from large areas. And then after that, we have what we have to deal with. The property's already basically been ravaged, and particularly when it's in a residential area like this, what are the residents supposed to be thinking, except, oh my, what am I supposed to do now? There goes my property values. I don't want to live here like this, but it's already been destroyed. I have no avenues. So what I'm asking, is there any way that we can set some kind of an ordinance, either in our development plans or anywhere in our codified, that before something like this mass of a thing can actually be ceased, to see if it can be rezoned first?
Mr. Tersky, do you want to? So Mr. Tursky and I have been working with GPD to get some recommendations after this happened. I knew council was interested in, there's always pros and cons of regulating, right? So we had asked for some sample ordinances and some recommendations from other communities they work for, what's working well, because they would be the one to ultimately review any application. So we can bring some recommendations potentially forward for you guys to look at. You know, again, it's always the tension is people are allowed to, you know, if someone wants to cut the trees down their property, do they have to ask permission versus controlling what you're talking about, which is, yeah.
Well,
Just
clearly,
tension to it.
clearly in cases like this, all this property being immediately opened up to the elements, it has a great impact on all surrounding property as well as anybody that's downstream. So I'm thinking something along that line. And since I'm on a roll, I love our planning commission. They listen as much as people don't think they do. However, I would really like to have some clarification somewhere, perhaps even on their recommendations that states that they are just a recommending body. They do not have the final say, so that people can get this, because of the distress that's been caused by numerous residents thinking they went before the planning commission and it's over and done.
Yeah, I think there's probably overdue for a little bit of a rewrite on our
Rewrite.
procedure in the zoning code, so we can bring forward some language to try to clean up that procedure and make it clear to everybody what the process is.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And I just want to add to the tree thing Ms. Whipke just talked about, and Mr. Markey talked about too. And I think like residents do have the say to cut down trees on their property. And I think that everybody could agree, if you want to cut your trees down, you can cut your trees down. But when it comes to a massive, that affects every neighbor around, and even the neighbors that are down the road, or people that are just driving through the community and they look over and like, man, who nuked that property, you know? I think that there needs to be some kind of an ordinance in place to protect the larger pieces of property. Like one of the neighbors said over there, you know, if some of the trees were left, maybe there was a buffer kind of tucked in a little industrial park back in, you know, maybe it would have been a more feasible thing. I raised his hand.
Hands up there, but it's all right, we'll get you.
That's all I.
In the back, Mr. Newman, if you could state your name and address.
Dan Newman, 3172 Cleveland Mountain. I was wondering if you guys were allowed to mandate or in the zoning codes a setback ordinance, so that when something like this happened, the residents knew, you know, that they're going to put an industrial park next to a residential unit. If you bump those two together, can you mandate 300 feet or 600 feet of a buffer zone, or mandate an increase in whatever the buffer zone is? I mean, if I can't build a house right beside my neighbors, there's a buffer zone, you know, you have to get a variance if you want to be too close. I think Bath has it where, you know, if they want to put this in, that's fine. You got to stay 400 feet from Mr. Welton's property, and you have to plant arborvitaes and you know, a buffer, something to keep the impact away from all the people that are opposed to this. If they knew that that was part of the project going forward, yeah, they want to put this in here, we're protected because the council has passed this. Is that possible?
That was done somewhat on the Clinton aluminum property, but Mr. Markey could probably speak.
I
more
asked him in
specifically to
the
that.
Clinton aluminum project, and it was 100 feet at the time, and people were distraught. I mean, and some of the people, the impact on Fairland Road, if you drive up that road, you can see how it spills into their backyard. It's a disaster.
What
So
I'm
I
saying is-
understand these people's.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm not, and that's why I was asking Mr. Markey's help, is I don't know if that was just that project or if that's in
I
the
think
code.
we negotiated that with them as
Okay.
part of the approval process, the mounding and the buffering, and you know, some of the setbacks.
So what you're talking about would need to be looked into, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, there's setbacks in each of the zoning code classifications, there's setback requirements, and industrial has a short setback requirement, the
But-
I-1 industrial does.
But we don't have anything now
Yeah.
that's a blanket statement for when these things continue to go forward for the people that are sitting back here right beside it. And the question is, which would probably alleviate some of their distress, is can you do that? And can you do that before this goes in, or at a time in the future if you turn this down, so that the next application, the next drawing like that comes up, the picture shows Mr. Welton that the driveway is 500 feet from his house instead of a 120-foot tall building, or whatever that may be. And I think that would probably down the road, as these vacant parcels are developed, which some of them will be. It's 2023. We're moving forward. But people need to be protected from, R1 bumped against industrial. That's preposterous in my view, and none of us, you guys, none of us want that. You don't want an industrial building beside your house, do you, Mr. Zeta?
No, sir.
No. And I think that's all anybody wants. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, if you could give your name and address for the record.
Vince Magazine, 3282 Wadsworth Road. When you do clear a large parcel of land, what he did, I work for the Summit County Engineers, where the ODNR and the EPA require him to put in seed, straw, and runoff measures. So I see none of that up there. So, I mean, that would go a long way with the residents. If he would do some kind of erosion control, it is mandated already by the ODNR and the EPA, which with the council here should help the residents with that, and maybe contact the EPA and the ODNR and get that in place. Because right now it's just mud, and you got a lot of runoff on people's property and in the streams and creeks. So that's all I really have to say about that.
Thank you. Mr. Petrus. And again, if you could give your name and address for the record.
Tom Petridge, 3762 Eastern Road. One point was brought up, the gentleman next to me, he said that he went to a zoning board meeting to get a variance on a little bit larger pole barn to extend it, and it was turned down. So he had no recourse to come to council and say, please override this. So if that's a zoning issue for a resident, what gives this gentleman the right then to push it forward? I know it's in the charter. I don't know if there's any municipal law involved in that, or it's strictly in our charter that has to go forward with a rezoning application. So what's the fine line of that between resident and somebody wanting to do commercial?
Yeah, so it was a variance. The other one was a variance. So there would have been appeal rights that could have been taken up to the Court of Common Pleas if there was a denial of a variance, and that's through the BZA. Planning Commission generally is just a recommending body. So that's all laid out. There is some provisions in the revised code,
But it's
our
all
charter,
within the charter.
It's all within the charter.
Not
exactly.
ORC.
Exactly.
And then the other thing, somebody that comes in and clears 60 acres of land to that extent either has tacit approval from an administration, or somebody gives a green light and says no problem, or it's a bullying technique to get their way. Clear the land. Now what are you going to do? And the last thing, I just looked up what it would be. You can take that 60 acres in corn and it'll bring about $75,000 in income. Might not be a good enough return for his investment. I don't know what he paid for that property, but over time he can make it back that way, put it in hay and corn. That's all.
Thank you. And again, I got to ask you to give your name and address, please.
Brittany Vestal, 3523 Wadsworth Road. Spoke to the EPA this afternoon, and they don't have anything on file where he's filed anything, and they are not aware that he's been scooping out the drainage of your, I can't think of the name of it.
Ma'am, if you could please just address
I'm sorry, the
council.
protected wetland? Yes. So I have phone numbers if anyone needs to contact the right people, because there are different departments for runoff water and groundwater and stream water. So, but they don't have anything on file. Nobody's heard from any of them.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Please give your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Rick Condick, 3431 Wadsworth Road. My property is on the easternmost, on the property that meets with Littles. And a few years ago, I applied for a variance to add on to a pole building. I have a 2,000 square foot pole building. I want to add on to it. And the committee turned me down. They said, why do you need such a big building? I said, I'm using it for storage. And they said, well, yeah, people say that. And the next thing you know, they're starting to run a business out of it or something. I said, that's not what I'm going to do. And they said, well, yeah, but eventually when you move, the next person who buys your property might buy it or start running a business out of it. I don't have any control of that. You know, they're saying that, you know, 2,000 square foot buildings, you know, too big on a residential. I got 5 acres. It's not like a postage stamp, you know, and you're looking at building how big of buildings? Like I said, it's not like, and they said they were looking out for my neighbors. You know, because they said they didn't want, you know, me building too big of a building on my property, you know, might have a negative effect on my neighbors. Well, what do you think this is gonna do? I mean, come on. I mean, it's, you know, and like I said, as far as, I was turned down on the variance, you know. Now, I don't know what kind of recourse I could have had on that, or if any. Like I said, I can't come before council, you know, to ask for approval for it. I just, Mr. Markey said something about I could appealed it. I'm not sure it would have made any difference. I mean, they were basically, nope, it's too big, you know, you're in a residential area. You know, they were looking out for my neighbors. Well, how about let's look at the neighbors again, you know. Like I said, mine was only 2,000 square foot, and I was looking to add about 700 feet to the building. You know, so that's all I have to say. You know, it's, you know, I mean, I realize I don't have his resources, you know, but hey, I'm just a resident here, you know. That's all I got to say, you know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? We will move on to letter C, civil service rules. And because we are missing 2 members, we can't really move on this, but we can have discussion. Mr. Bates, this would fall to you. I don't know if you're prepared to speak about this.
No, not specifically. I'm not used to both of these guys not being here at the same time, but I know we talked about this recently, and there were several questions that came up. I know Ms. Whipke sent out an email that we did receive a response from on several questions, so I guess from there we can open it up if everybody's had a chance to review those, if there's further questions.
On me now?
If you'd like, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd actually asked about the civil service receiving the current union contracts annually in January, and I was wondering why they just didn't get them when they were ratified, because it seems like often that's not when we're getting them. And I was answered both in the email and on the floor, I believe, that they can provide the contract upon ratification, which I know you could, but couldn't we put that in there? That once it's ratified, couldn't that language be changed, that once a contract is available, it goes to them?
Yes. Yeah.
So that they can be familiar. I mean, talking and having it in writing is 2 separate things. And then for the classified service, I'd asked if the mayor or the administrative officer just made up positions and could add them without the consent of council. Actually, it was answered on the floor that the council creates positions, and then we have to okay them. So the answer was no, but then I kind of had another one pop into my head. We're the impound officer. Have we always had a designated impound officer? Was that something new? Because I don't remember ever having done that. You don't have to answer that tonight unless you absolutely know. And then I'd asked about the examination methods. That's Rule 7. And it being included that the same questions and examiners do both the test. And at the time it was stated that a lot of times they don't do the oral ones. However, if they did, it's being included that the same questions and examiners will do both the tests. That was the answer to me. And then 7.05, pre-employment drug psychological background, that it was given by a licensed practitioner. I'd say that the word license doesn't really need to be changed. It's already in the 2010 version. And I'd asked why the city was replacing the Civil Service Commission. And it was answered that this change was actually asked for by the Civil Service. And also they extenuated on it a little bit. All pre-employment drug testing, agility testing, and medical examinations are done by the same place for all employees. The background checks for all employees, rather than the police department, is done by the fingerprint process run by the state of Ohio. The police department has a more intense background check process that is handled by them. Does that mean by the police department? Thank you.
What? Yeah, by the police department, yes.
Okay. Moving on, the performance evaluation, that's Rule 13. Again, I'd asked why it'd been taken away and from the Civil Service Commission, and it was stated the Civil Service only wanted access to the evaluations. They will always be made available to the Civil Service Commission. And I'd asked about the STAR evaluations, and the answer was stated, STAR feedback helps managers provide relevant and actionable feedback by considering the following 3 factors: situation/task, specific challenge the employee faced or project initiative worked on; action, the approach they took with the situation or task; results, how did the action they took impact the outcome of the situation or task. The STAR feedback model gives managers a simple yet effective process for delivering relevant feedback. It gives employees the confidence to act on their good ideas again. Or in the case of a negative feedback, the employee learns exactly what they should have done instead. And then I'd asked about who gets copies. That's Rule 15, suspension, demotion, dismissal. Who gets the copies of the write-ups and such? Answer is they will be put into the employee's personal file. Rule 16, reinstatement. Again, why change the city as opposed to the civil service? And again, the change was requested by the Civil Service Commission. And then I'd asked about the political activity, which, why some of the unclassified employees were allowed to participate more so than classified. That is like a 2-page answer, which is going, the 124.57 is that, Mr. Markey, would that be administrative code, or is that?
That would be the revised code.
That's
That's the revised code.
Revised code?
Yep.
So the answers in several sections. I mean, I could read it, but this will be included in our packet.
Yeah, Ms. Whipke, I'll just mention, there's a Ohio Revised Code and Ohio Administrative Code provision that prohibits classified employees from participating in partisan activity.
In some things, yes.
Yes.
And the administrative code is applicable as well. A lot of people don't understand that it is applicable just like the revised code is. Let's see. And they would have, those also have everything that they're allowed to, permissible for everybody. Let's see, okay. And that would be the last I would have on that. Like I said, this will be included in the packet when the approved minutes, so that you'll be able to see it all for yourselves unless you want to look it up. And if you did, it was revised code section 124.57. Is there anything else I need on that, Mr. Markey?
No.
And then administrative code was Rule 123, 1-46-02. So I'm done with that. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything under the civil service rules? I'll probably announce this later, but that's going to move to the next work session because it can't move forward this evening. Moving on to letter D, PC Resolution 6, 2023. Mr. DeHartpart.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for PC Resolution 6-2023. This is Chapter 1287. This is for what we call a MUD district, mixed-use district. This is to place a moratorium on the mixed-use district here in the city of Norton. You know, we've seen some things happen. We're trying to protect parcels of property, and the Planning Commission has suggested till we get a revision done that we put the moratorium in effect, and I would like to see this go first reading and passed with emergency language so we can get this thing wrapped up next Monday. Anybody else have anything they want to add to that?
Are you calling for the motion now, or?
I was going to let you talk first.
Okay, thank you. I think about everybody knows how I feel about the MUD district. I've not been very bashful about stating my feelings on it, and the fact, as far as I'm concerned, it needs to go away. But if we can't make it totally go away, then we do need to fix it. The Planning Commission did recommend that we put a moratorium in place, but what the moratorium would do is it would, we won't have to even accept applications. We're going to stop accepting applications for any kind of a MUD district. For a real quick overview, for those that don't know, MUD district can be applied to 10 acres or more anywhere. And it has, well, my biggest shame, Brookside. We don't want to see another Brookside whatsoever, anything close to it. And we have basically nothing. There's 2 pages in the code concerning, I believe it's 1280, yeah, chapter 1287, with literally nothing there, reining that in. The Planning Commission, Mr. Dowling in particular, did go out and get various other cities. I believe there was like 5 of them, 1 from Pennsylvania, 2 from Delaware, I believe. Talmadge I didn't get through because there's pages and pages, and there's a lot more than just the MUD district. All of those have much stricter requirements in what we carry. And this is something that, as far as I'm concerned, is a definite benefit for the citizens and the city in general. You've also probably heard me say, we need to maintain the flavor and the integrity of what Norton is about. That is what makes us the jewel that has been stated in the newspapers. It's not the fact that we're going to bring in this and bring in that, how many houses we can squeeze together. It's what most of us stayed here for or came here for. So we need to do whatever we can to protect that, and putting this moratorium in place is definitely so. I am 300% get this put on for next week, waive the readings and pass it. I will never be so happy to waive readings and get something passed as I will that piece of legislation.
Ms. Whipke, would you like to make the motion for that?
Thank you, Mr. D. Harpart. I make a motion to add PC Resolution 6-2023 to next week's agenda, looking to waive the readings, second and third, and have the final vote.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion?
I just had a quick question, Mr. President. How did we come up with 24 months versus any other time period?
It said, we had 6 months. Does it
Right.
now say 6 months was, 24 months was the original
Yeah.
one?
Right.
And then we had
Original.
shortened it to 6 months.
And we could go back over this at any time, and once it's revised and it's something that council agrees on, we can put it right back into effect, right, Mr. Markey?
Yeah, that's
Right.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we're going to shoot for 24 months off the bat. I mean,
Yeah.
I was there at the planning committee meeting last week, and for them to do anything, we've been waiting since last July. Nothing's gotten done, which is some of the urgency here. They know they need the time. They want to think it over. They want to get it right, whatever it is they're going to do. And that's exactly what we need to do. So, hey, I'm good with 24 months. I'm good for it going away permanently, but I'll take whatever I can get to get this thing stopped.
24 months seems like a long time when it's government stuff. That's,
It's not so long.
it's not so long, yeah.
And again, we can always, if if it's necessary, or we deem it, or whoever's sitting up here when it comes around again decides it's something that needs to go back into force, it can be brought out.
I guess I'm not opposed to it. I don't think it's necessary, the 24 months. I even wonder if the whole thing's necessary, because if the planning commission passes it 3 weeks later, I'm not opposed to it, just speaking my opinion on it.
The way it's been used and the way it was presented and everything else about this, mud is a great name for it. It's just perfect. I don't think it was ever implemented in the manner that it should have been, nor did we enforce it. And actually, planning had some ideas for what it is we ought to be looking at and doing. And hey, I'm more than willing to accept the blame. We helped get this through an education, being foolish, whatever, thinking we were going to get something wonderful. And we pushed it through, and we see what we got, and I definitely don't want anything like that ever again.
So to be clear, the motion is for a 24-month. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. DeHarpart?
Yes.
Okay, that will move on to next week's meeting. Letter E, appropriations. Mr. Bates.
Thank you, Mr. President. Real quick before I dive in too far, page 119 lists out the 2023 appropriations amendment and the 2023 estimated resources amendment. So the top section of that, they're both titled the same thing. The bottom section should read 2023 estimated resources amendment number 1, just for clarification. So this would include both of them. Ms. Keener had provided us a memo on page 115 of the agenda. It just lists out everything, kind of explains what we're trying to do here. The bigger items fall with the Cherrywood Driftwood. As we know, we were trying to get that done, and bids kept coming in higher and higher and higher. So just more needs to be appropriated on that end of things. So just wanted to draw that one out and then open it for questions on anything else.
Anybody have anything?
If not, I'll make a motion to add ordinance number 31, 2023 to next council's agenda.
And I will second that. There's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Bates?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes. Letter F, transfer, and that's Mr. Bates again.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this would be, based on the appropriations amendments we just added to the agenda, this would be the actual transfer for $258,000 to capital projects for the local share of the Cherrywood Driftwood paving project. And then didn't know if there was any questions on that one either. If not, I'd make a motion to add ordinance 32, 2023 to the next agenda.
And I will second that motion. There is a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion?
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Whipke.
I would just like to point out, going back to the appropriations, when we're talking about, the permissive tax, that's your license plate monies, just to let you clarify that for the residents here.
Anything else? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Bates?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes. Moving on to non-agenda items. Are there any non-agenda items to come before council this evening?
Oh, that's right, people aren't here. Okay, first of all, I want to say thank you to Mr. Tursky. Has been noticed that there was some cleanup done at the end of Golf Course Drive. Still got some dead trees down there that need to go. Not sure who those are, but wanted to tell you thank you. I missed it last week. The heavy truck traffic on Reimer Road. Have we heard anything more about that, or the speeding going down? Has anything been done about that?
I'll follow up with the police chief. I know they were targeting that area a little bit more, but I'll see what's come about from that.
Okay, thank you. Guess we still haven't gotten our $16,000. Or any movement been made on that?
No.
Have we heard anything back at all?
Yeah, they The last correspondence is they had their billing, was it accounts receivable person
Whatever,
process
yeah.
the payment, so we're just waiting on the check to come in. Payroll. Payables, my apologies.
And I know you'd been looking at getting some of those issues down on the Shellhart Road, yards taken care of. Have we heard any update on that?
Yeah, actually, our service director has been in contact with Mr. Miller regarding the front portion of that property. And he is going to partake the work on himself. He's gonna do it himself, but Larry is gonna go out there and see if he needs anything in terms of dirt or seed.
And, oh gosh, the other guy's name
The
is,
other gentleman, we've continued to try to reach out to him, but he has yet to, if you wanna reach out, if you would be kind enough to reach out to him and tell him to call us back. we'd appreciate it.
Carmichael, was that what I think it was?
I don't have my sheet in front of me, but.
Yeah, I think that's what it was off the top of my head. But yeah, I will try and get in touch with him again. I know that he had been out of town for a little bit, but
Okay.
I think he's back now, but whatever. And then along those same lines, since we're looking at doing some work on Cleveland, Massillon and stuff, we are gonna be looking at making sure that those front lawns are gonna be a little bit looked into better
Yes,
in the future and hold some of these people accountable when they do lousy work.
correct,
Or they cut things down that shouldn't be cut down.
correct.
And that our citizens get what they should have gotten for when they make errors like that instead of a token. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whitby.
I had two things, Mr. President. One, I would like to kind of push the envelope. There's a lot of people here that will probably agree with what I'm going to say. 261 on Hametown Road, like, I know there's been traffic studies done over a number of years. What can we do to kind of push the envelope along? Because I think I said it in a couple council meetings ago, that once this allotment finishes up, the traffic flow is gonna be through there is just gonna be even crazier than what it is. And there's so many wrecks, so I'd really like to put a little bit more pressure to see what we can get going there.
Can I, you know, can I
Go
get
ahead,
the
yeah,
update?
please.
So last week, we did authorize GPD to do a traffic count study on that. It'll be good for 3 years, but it'll give us an idea of the initial steps we wanna take, whether that means a stop sign, a light, or a roundabout, until we know what is appropriate there. We need to know what's appropriate there
Sure.
before we act. So that, hopefully we'll have that. The need of urgency for that was because we need to have it when school's in session to get the maximum amount of traffic.
Right.
Gotcha. And it was told to me, since that is a state route, that you gotta deal with the state agencies on that as well.
Yeah.
So it makes it a little bit harder just for public record.
And there is an update for, I know one of the residents, forgive me about the condition of 261. That is scheduled to be paved. Tentatively right now is 2026.
Okay.
Well,
It's-
wait, hang on, actually, that sounds way too far out. Give me a second.
Won't be a road left.
No, it is April 2026. That is our, yeah, that's
But
a
that's
state.
used with a different pot of money that's state, yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
It's not local
Okay.
dollars.
And just add on what Mr. Tursky said, just to remind everybody, historically, you have to have a certain number of accidents and a certain number of cars.
Right.
We've looked at that intersection historically, there weren't enough accidents, wasn't enough traffic to justify a signal or any sort of thing at the time, so.
The
now-
last time we
The
looked.
last time we looked at it, so now we're looking again.
If we can get a current view at it,
Yeah.
it's better. Second thing was, I don't know how, I don't wanna say this and be vindictive, or anything. The corner lot where the digital sign is that does, says all the things that are going on in the city, that's city-owned property, right? All right, so I had a complaint from a business about advertising being on city property for the Pet Supplies Plus sign on city property. So,
Where was it at on city property?
right next to the digital sign, there's a Pet Supplies Plus banner and 2 big signs on city property. So if you didn't know, now you do. So,
Mr. Tursky, when you did say 3 years to get that study done for the
No, the study won't take 3 years. The study is good for 3 years once it's completed. So every traffic data lasts only 3 years.
Anybody
Thank you.
else? Okay, we'll move on to topics for next work session. Yeah, the next work session, civil service rules will be on there because we couldn't move them this evening. I believe we'll be talking about the 5-year capital plan, and both chiefs and Mr. Hess will be in attendance, is that correct? To discuss that. That's all I have at the moment. Anybody else has anything to add? If not, before I adjourn the meeting, does anybody have anything else to say?
For next work session.
Yeah, so I do have a couple things for the
Sure.
next work session. We just got the proposal back today. The design work for Clark Mill will be at the next work session for discussion. And then just so everyone knows, Friday, the Eastern Road and Congo Bridge project will go out for bid. So the scheduled time for those bids to come back in is May 22nd. I know that's been a hot topic issue well before I got here, but that is hopefully now coming to a close. So.
Great.
Yeah, Mr. Townsend's mentioned there's updates to the state law of distracted driving, texting while driving. We'll have an update for the codifieds to implement that on the Norton side.
Oh, okay.
Oh, currently state law, but also on the Norton side.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned.